All right, I'll call the meeting to order.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, posted properly?
Your mic's not on.
Your mic's on.
It's not working.
Now we got technical problems.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay, the meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
In the future, just hit it harder. All right, roll call, please.
President Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Renucci.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes. Commissioner Morath. Commissioner Seeger. Commissioner Harding.
Here.
Before we get started, I do want to welcome Commissioner Brian Harding. Thank you for volunteering to serve on the Plan Commission and to fill our vacant seat. So glad to have you here at your first meeting.
You're not going to get Chris Schubittel every week, just so you know.
Okay, we will start with citizen participation. Per Village Resolution 2017-01, anyone wishing to address the Plan Commission during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject must specifically relate to matters under the jurisdiction of the Plan Commission, whether on the agenda or not. The Plan Commission should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of the publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of this citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or if specifically allowed by a majority vote of the Plan Commission due to involvement in an agenda item. And I will say we do have 2 items with public hearings this evening. If you're here to speak on that, it's probably more appropriate for you to speak at that time, but you're more than welcome to come talk about that or anything else during citizen participation. Going once, going twice. Okay, I will close citizen participation. We'll move on to approval of minutes from November 11th.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes from November 11th as presented.
Second.
All right, any questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, while I'm sure our zoning regulations regarding mobile food establishments is a hot topic for people, I suspect that most people that are here for miscellaneous business item 1. So we will go there first. Tax incremental district number 5. So I will open the public hearing. It's a public hearing regarding the proposed creation of a tax incremental district number 5, the proposed boundaries of the district, and the proposed project plan for the district. So what we'll do is we will have a presentation from Ellers, from Kayla, and we'll go through that and have any questions, and then we'll take any public questions or comments at that time. Kayla?
Thank you. My name is Kayla Thorpe. I'm an associate municipal advisor with Ellers. We are the village's public finance advisors. We've been working along with the village for a number of years on the logistics and feasibility planning for tax incremental district number 5, and are proud to present the project plan for your consideration tonight. I'm going to skip around a little bit, so I'll kind of try to list off page numbers or section numbers as I go. But just kind of outlining the Plan Commission's role in this process. Earlier today, if you were just here a few minutes ago, the Joint Review Board held their initial meeting to open the process for the creation of tax incremental district number 5. That is a requirement under state statute. Plan Commission is designated by the village's ordinance to be the next governing body to take a look at this project plan, the district boundaries, and the financials contained within that, to then potentially recommend approval to the village board. The village board is slated to meet on December 3rd to approve the project plan should the Plan Commission recommend approval, at which date the district will be established as a statutory TID district. The Joint Review Board is scheduled to meet on January 20th to take the final review that the process has been completed per statute and pass a resolution of adoption of the district. And so your process tonight is to review the district boundaries, review the project plan, and make a recommendation to the village board. Tax incremental district number 5 has been in the works. I think our files go back to 2018 in various iterations, but have never gotten to the point of this public hearing. And so this is a huge accomplishment of the village staff, and the developers associated with the district to getting to this point in time. A lot of the narrative contained within the project is to meet statutory requirements for a number of things to be contained, primarily the but-for test, but a lot of narrative as far as project costs, cash flows, district boundaries, relocation costs, just a lot of narrative that goes to meet state statute. I am not going to review that all verbatim. I'm going to highlight a few things and then primarily talk about the project costs, what those projects are, and how the district is going to pay for all of those costs. Tax incremental district number 5 is a proposed district that is defined as a in need or of rehabilitation or conservation district. And what that requires under statute is that at least 50% of the parcels contained within the district need to be deemed in need of rehab or conservation. There is no statutory definition of what rehab or conservation is. It is a broad kind of designation. It is just required that at least 50% of the parcels contained within the district meet that designation, which we will substantiate with a parcel list later in the project plan. But the total acreage of the district is 23.22%, or 23.22 acres, primarily consisting of the Main Street corridor and the Village Square. The village anticipates making total expenditures of about $12.7 million, of which $2.3 million are public infrastructure costs, majority related to the School Street lift station upgrade. There are some expenditures for sidewalk and repairs and streetlight upgrades. The village anticipates initiating a revitalization and facade grant program, right now anticipated at $200,000. There is a $315,000 for the Marathon property acquisition and site preparation, $5.2 million in total development incentives. The majority of that is for the Saywall development for Overlook Ridge. $536,000 of ongoing planning and administrative costs to account for all of the planning, engineering, plan review, and then village administrative costs to execute all of the happenings of the district, along with $1.2 million in interest and financing costs and repayments of advances. That does not include principal payments associated with the debt that is planned to pay for some of these project costs. For those project costs, the village is anticipating that new value of just over $30 million or just under $31 million will be added as a result of the developments contained within the district over the 27 years of this district. Our cash flow feasibility analysis is projecting that the district could satisfy all of its obligations within 25 of its 27 allowable years, but if you had just heard the conversation we had with the Joint Review Board around the new Act 12 provisions, that is a topic of conversation that will be at the final Joint Review Board as it is the closure date is designated by the Joint Review Board. That closure date does not marry the village to closing that district within that time. It is really to capitalize on some statutory incentives that could be utilized by all taxing jurisdictions should the district close within 75% of its useful life. This is a new statute that took effect on October 1st, 2024. So this is one of the first districts being created, not only with our firm, but in the state after that point in time. And so this will be kind of a case of exercise as to how the Joint Review Board wants to simply designate a date. It will need to be contained within the resolution, but is not something that the Planning Commission needs to worry about as far as their recommendation to the village board. The following summary of findings are really the but-for test, and that is the major statutory test that the Joint Review Board, the Plan Commission, the Village Board must meet and define and feel confident in the test to approve the district. It is, in simply terms, but for the incentive, but for the creation of this district, the developments contained within the district would not happen. And so the mechanics of a tax incremental district kind of work as such. The value is locked as of the creation date, which will be December 23rd, should this process play out. The value, the tax dollars generated on the value as of that date will be distributed to the overlying taxing jurisdictions as they normally are today. All new value over and beyond that base value, that locked value, the tax dollars generated on that new value will be foregone by the overlying taxing jurisdictions and contained within the TID to pay for project costs. And all of those tax dollars over that time will not be distributed to the overlying taxing jurisdictions. They will go for pay for the project costs, all incentives, and then also if there are any residual funds at the end of the district, meaning there's a savings account or cash money on hand at the end of the district, that is redistributed back to the overlying taxing jurisdictions based on their proportional parts of the tax bill. And there's an exercise at the end of this project plan that kind of outlines what those annual taxes would be. The primary reason for the creation and the driver of this district is the Overlook Ridge Saywell development and related development agreement. Our firm was engaged to perform a comprehensive pro forma analysis on that development, meaning we worked directly with the developers to do a deep dive into their financials, their private equity financing, the equity they're bringing to the table, the cash they're bringing to the table, the structure of their private equity financing, the interest rates, kind of everything you could possibly think of from the developer side as to why they would or would not need any financial assistance from the village. And the exercise is really to protect the village, protect the overlying taxing jurisdictions and the tax revenues they are foregoing, but also to ensure that this district and this incentive is not unduly enriching a developer more than they need. And we take a look at that on a number of bases, a cash-on-cash basis, a cash-on-investment basis, and boil it down to what is their rate of return on any of those. Industry standard rate of return is really 8 to 9%. After all financial incentives. With the incentive I laid out here in the initial developers pro forma, they would be having a 6.6% rate of return over 25 years without any assistance. The $4.8 million earmarked in this district gets them to an 8.2% return on investment, which is well within the industry standards of 8 to 9%. So we are confident that our analysis in the district can support the incentive. This was one of the few cases in which a developer's ask was actually substantiated by our analysis. Normally, we scale those back a little bit, but in this case, the developer was very forthcoming with their financials and was very open and transparent with us, the village, and all those involved in getting the understanding that their ask is actually what they needed to get to an industry rate of return. And so that report is on file with the village board. It is a report and a process that is done off of the village's kind of network to ensure that the developer's private financial holdings are not necessarily made public, just the summary report to ensure that the development incentive is necessary to make the project cost get off the table. That is the number one rule, or that is the number one test, that but-for test, to substantiate within the project plan, and that you all must substantiate to recommend to the village board for approval, is that but for this incentive, the Overlook Ridge development would not be happening. The other things that are required to be substantiated is not less than 50% of the property within the district is in need of rehab or conservation. We have a summary that will substantiate that, that we meet the 12% threshold, and that the district can positively cash flow and pay for all of its project costs within its statutory deadline. All of those statutory requirements are outlined in the project plan, and I will kind of touch on as we go through. I'm just going to highlight the first map so you can all get a general understanding of the boundaries of the district. State statute requires that the district be contiguous property, and so we've utilized right-of-way in a number of areas to get contiguous parcels to or properties to get the district created. This does include a lot of the Main Street properties as well as the Village Square. The other maps contained within the project plan outline the existing land use designations, what the future land use designations could be if all of these developments happen, a half-mile parcel radius map, And that really is to define what that half-mile boundary is. Statute allows you to pay for projects within a half mile of the district boundaries, should those projects be of benefit to the district. There are none planned, and there are none being discussed. We just include the map to ensure that if there's a project plan amendment to create a half-mile project clause, that we've defined what that half mile is up front. Section 4 outlines the preliminary parcel list on a parcel number and owner and acreage basis as to all of the parcels contained within the district, and really then goes to designate which parcels are deemed in need of rehab or conservation. And so we are deeming that 15.02 acres of the total 23.22 acres are in need of rehab or conservation, and getting us to 65% of the total land acres. And that satisfies the test of more than 50% is in need of rehab or conservation. Section 5 is our equalized value test. Statute requires that no more than 12% of the village's total equalized value can be contained in any TID districts at any one point in time. The village has an open TID district, and so those districts contain about 6.85% of total equalized value. Therefore, we have remaining residual capacity to add $32.6 million of equalized value into a TID district. And so we have significant capacity to add this district under state statute. Section 6 starts a lot of the legal statutory required jargon and kind of what we're going to do about if utilities need to be relocated and all that kind of stuff. And so I am not going to go through all of those kind of headers each. I'm really going to jump to the estimated project costs, which is section 8 of your project plan. And this outlines each project that the village plans on undertaking, both in an ongoing and a phased approach. And so the village plans, as we've noted, to upgrade the School Street lift station on the design for that and the construction, sidewalk improvements, sidewalk light improvements, and revitalization grants. Those are all the public improvement projects on the front end of the project plan to happen within 2026. And then the revitalization grant right now is slated to begin in 2030. That is purely speculative at this point and is wholly dependent on the financial performance of the district. That 2030 timeline is when the district is, and you'll see this in the cash flow, projected to have significant enough cumulative fund balance to pay for its obligations outside of any new programs, and that's when we felt confident that the program could begin. But the initiation of that program is up to the village board at any point in time. The Marathon property tank and demo is obviously outlined, as well as those other ongoing planning and administrative costs and financing and long-term interest and debt costs, for total project expenditures of just over $11 million. For that $11 million investment, the village is anticipating that the total additional value over and beyond the value as of today will be $30.955 million. Over the 27 useful life, we anticipate that total value coming on by the mid-2030s, and then the village will generate the increment to continue to pay for those project costs over the remaining useful life by 2037. How we get to that dollar amount and how we get to that value are outlined in the next couple of exhibits. Our development assumptions take a look at each of the specific developments and which construction years they will be coming online. It is important to note that construction year does not equal revenue year, and there is essentially a 3-year delay between construction year, valuation year, and revenue year. And so the Overlook Ridge development is anticipated to start adding value in 2025's construction year for a valuation year of 1/1/26, which equals a revenue year of 1/1/27. So as we work through this cash flow, please note that just because you'll start to see construction potentially in 2025, that does not mean that property tax generation on that value will happen next year. That property tax generation on a 2025 construction will happen in 1/1/27. Just that's how the timeline works for valuations. But through 2028, there will is anticipated to be the majority of the value added in the district. We have earmarked in 2036 a potential for future developments, and that's really dependent on the work that's going to be happening on the onset, spurring redevelopment in the down years within the district happening. The next table, Table 2 within this section, is the tax increment projection worksheet. There's a number of factors going into this that are what we believe is ultra-conservative, but really protect and kind of hedge on the bet of the low side of everything. We are seeing declining tax rates across the state, it not only on an equalized but an assessed value. The tax rates contained within this plan are on an equalized value basis, so they will not match your tax bill that you may be getting in the mail in a couple days. Just because that's on an assessed value basis, we are calculating on an equalized value basis. That's how all TID districts are calculated across the state. And so the current equalized tax rate for the village is $14.44. We are projecting a negative 0.25% decline year after year. That is very conservative because we are seeing property tax rate declines of about 13% on average. But what we are doing to offset that decline is accounting for a 1.25% economic appreciation. And that's just a natural appreciation of property values over time. That is also much larger than 1.25%. So in hypothetical terms, a larger decline in tax rate with a larger incline in economic appreciation will offset throughout time. And so we feel that this is an ultra-conservative approach to get an understanding of what the anticipated tax increment revenue generation could be within the district. And that is anticipated over 27 years to be $11.3 million. Really, Overlook Ridge will account for an annual tax, once it's all online, tax generation of about $334,000. To pay for public improvement projects in the Marathon property purchase and demo, the village anticipates to issue 2 promissory notes in 2026, one on a general obligation side, and that means it's tax exempt, and one on a taxable side, which means that investors who purchase that will need to pay taxes on it. And that is because the village anticipates to sell the Marathon property at a point in time, therefore it does not qualify to be issued as a tax exempt obligation. We anticipate that that small $315,000 note will be issued as a local bank loan. That allows us and the village to significantly reduce the financing expenses or the cost of issuances. There will be no disclosure council, no Moody's rating call. All of those costs are eliminated by a local bank loan. The $1.3 million to pay for the School Street lift station, the TID portion of the School Street lift station, will be financed by a market rate loan. And so there is increased cost of issuances associated with that. All of which principal and interest payments are able to be repaid and positively cash flow throughout the district life. Table 4, which is kind of the culmination of everything we are discussing, is our 27-year cash flow projection. Moving from left to right is revenues to expenditures, kind of outlining annual tax increments, any debt proceeds. In lieu of borrowing for the first few years of project costs before tax increment is generated, the village is going to be advancing from other funds, monies to the district to help pay for project costs. Those advances will be repaid from the district once there is positive enough cash within the district on an interest-free basis. Conversations with village staff is that the village did not have interest in charging the district an interest fee to sit on those advanced funds for a number of years. And so we are paying those back from the district on a dollar-for-dollar basis. Those advances primarily will be coming from the sewer utility fund, just over $1 million, really to offset the borrowing for the School Street lift station and help this district pay for that cost on a cash basis from the sewer utility. But other funds that have been identified that could advance funds are the general fund unrestricted cash balance, or redesignating capital fund cash monies on hand that could be redesignated at the village board approval. Principal and interest payments for the two notes have been structured in a manner to delay large principal payments until there is positive increment calculation. And that is structured because the Saywall MRO, which you see MRO number 1, which is a municipal revenue obligation, is on a before debt service basis. And so for the first 3 years, it's 50% of annual available increment or before debt service. And then after 3 years, it's 90% of available increment after debt service. The main sticking point here is this is Saywall only increment. They are not being paid an incentive on increment outside of what they generate. And the development agreement that'll be coming forth to the village board will have a minimum value guarantee. So if at any point in time the value declines or they don't meet what we've built into the project plan, they will still need to pay taxes on the value that we've outlined. And so really protects the district, protects the village to ensure that project costs can be paid for and that the revenue within the district is sufficient to meet our models and what they are basically telling us that they could generate an increment. We have confirmed that also with the village assessor, that the increment that they are projecting is with market rates values, and so we're confident that they will generate that value, but if not, they still have to pay taxes on that value. Total debt service payments over the life of the district will be just over $2.8 million. The total increment for Saywall, or the total incentive for Saywall will be just over $4.8 million over that 25-year repayments of that incentive. All of the other project costs that we have outlined to date through this presentation are contained on an annual basis in here. The only other thing is I want to highlight is the repayment of advances. While I said that it's on a dollar for dollar basis, the calculation looks a little weird in here. There's some years that it's lower, higher, and it fluctuates. It's being the repayment of incentives are being paid for on a calculation based off of the cumulative fund balance column. So the third column from the right, it is taking a look at what the total principal outstanding is, and if it's greater than 50% of what the incentive to Saywall is, then it calculates a payment back to the general fund or the sewer utility fund. It's just a fun Excel exercise we like to go through, but basically takes a look at what is the soonest that the district could start to repay any incentives back to other village funds. Ultimately, that is up to the village board to designate when the district wants to start to repay funds on an incremental basis, or if they want to wait till the end years and pay it on a lump sum basis. We are projecting it on an incremental basis just because we want to show what is the earliest closure date that the village, or that we anticipate the cash flow will allow the village to meet all of its obligations. And we are showing that it could meet all of its principal and incentive obligations in 2050 with a maximum statutory closure date of 2052. The only other thing would be the last page of the project plan outlines what each overlying taxing jurisdiction is foregoing on an annual basis to promote the development within this district. And that's where we get that $11.3 million, the majority of which comes from East Troy Community High School, with the village being the second largest taxing jurisdiction, foregoing general property taxes to pay for the development incentives and the projects contained within the district. So that is the project plan as before you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions related to the project plan and the finances. And I'm sure Eileen and President Johnson would be happy to answer anything as it relates to Saywall.
I gotta state that was an incredible presentation of what is a
thank you.
TID district and actually engaging.
Oh,
And it's the
thanks.
first time I've ever heard somebody say something exciting and fun about Excel, but, yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
I would also say thank you for doing that presentation twice.
Yes.
So before we take questions from the public, any questions from the commission for Kayla or anybody else?
Well, I got a few questions. I don't know if they're appropriate or whatever, but, so correct me if I'm wrong, but with this Overlook Ridge development, since we've started talking about it a year ago or so, they came to us and said how much money they're gonna make and all this stuff. And now you're saying that they can't do this project unless we give them this? Is that what they're saying?
So there is an industry standard for, industry standard for rate of returns for these types of developments. And what our analysis takes a look at is what is the gap between what this development could be if there was no public assistance and what the development would earn if there is public assistance. And really cutting to the short, developers aren't going to do anything unless they can get in that range of rate of return. And particularly with this development has been proposed, negotiated multiple iterations prior to COVID, and we are in a completely different world of what developers need to make a project happen after COVID. We saw construction costs increase significantly. This dollar amount has increased and changed significantly since at least I've been involved in the last year or so. Primarily because what the cost of construction is, what the cost of goods are, but also what market rates are. Market rates have somewhat stabilized in relation to costs of construction. And so if you want to see any type of multifamily, commercial, mixed use, any type of development happen within your community, this is what needs to happen. And to ensure that the village is not unduly enriching any developers, that pro forma analysis that we completed and have been working with the developer on over the last year. And so while I'm saying that all they want is public assistance, is not necessarily the most accurate description. It's saying that if there is no public assistance, that lot's just going to sit vacant in perpetuity.
The but-for.
And that's the but-for test, is but for public assistance, this development is not going to happen. And the developer is pretty open that they cannot make the financials work on their end to make this development happen in the size, the scale, and the scope that you all have looked at, that the village has asked them to do, that they have proposed without the public assistance.
And I would also say that this is not any different than what we've done with other developers. This is not unique to this developer. We've got another developer in the other TID that we've done this with. And we're talking about possibly in another TID in the future, which we talked about, conceptual designs, what was that, September? Plan Commission for the Brownfield. So I think this is not anything unique in that. The other thing too is I would point out that in essence, we're getting a $2 million lift station that the sewer ratepayers are not going to have to pay for.
Correct.
And that lift station has to be reconstructed anyway. So this project, right there alone, covers a $2 million cost, plus interest.
All right, so my next question I have is all the areas that are designated on this map here that you have for this TID district, is that development that we're just being proactive in making those areas TIDs, or are there people coming to us saying, we'll build in these locations if we get this designation?
So it's being more proactive. By putting a property in the TID, nothing has to happen with it. It's not obligating that property owner to do anything with it. It doesn't affect the property value. I will say that I did speak with the bars, the property owners, all the way on the end of the TID district. I'm sorry, I was trying to scroll to the map, but I wanted to answer your question, but this, we'll use this one because it clearly shows the boundaries. So I did talk to the bars. They have the vacant property that is just south of the Village Square. So they were aware of this and the chances that this might also spur for redevelopment of their property. The Roars, I believe, are aware of this development for the vacant cobblestone property. And I did speak with the Nagelsons, who have the Main Street Motors property, which is all the way at the other end of the TID. So those property owners are aware, are engaged. They're not saying, yes, something's going to happen. Yes, I'm committing to doing something. But they appreciate the fact that it could open the doors to provide something for those properties and spur that development. A lot of the other properties are also included for the contiguous nature. We targeted the Marathon property. I think we can all agree that that is a great but-for example. That property is been for sale for many years with nothing occurring on it because of what it is. So yeah, to answer your question, some of it is speculative, but there's no harm in including it in the TID.
And I guess my last question as of now is, with the state regulations for a TID district, is there certain restrictions for each parcel that whatever the zoning is, that's what it has to be? Or is there flexibility of what goes on that parcel? I don't know if I said the question correctly or not.
Kayla, you can jump in if I don't
Yeah.
answer this correctly, but I think it's more dictated by our zoning laws than it is by the actual TID. So that really falls on the Plan Commission and what we have properties zoned as and what we have them identified as in our comprehensive plan.
Correct. The only statutory requirement is that we must meet that 50% are designated in need of rehab or conservation. Zoning, use, what specific development, the state is not going to get involved, nor do they care. That is total under the local control.
Did that answer your question, Roger?
Yeah, I guess I misunderstood what someone told me a little while ago.
All right, other questions before we take questions from the public? Okay, anybody from the public? This is your time, public hearing. If you have questions, don't be afraid. We don't. You have. So I just say you have to come up because yeah.
Welcome to microphone.
So, just state your name and address, please, and we promise we won't bite. Yeah, just push the little people icon there. It'll turn green. There you go.
Okay, my name is Brittany Mayotte, and Watkins household, residential household. Just very frankly curious how this will personally affect us and our property.
From a practical standpoint, it will not. From a realistic standpoint, the more development that spurs within the village, your property value will naturally increase.
Okay. As far as taxes go,
It has no bearing on your tax bill at all.
and besides just increasing our value of our home, is there any other benefits that would apply to us?
So at the end of the useful life of the district, whenever the district closes, there is a equalized value addition that the village will experience. And that basically says that the district is going to create $30 million of equalized value. The village will be able to claim a portion of that. Essentially, at TID closure, it will drive down the tax rate, meaning the tax bill you receive in the year following the tax or the TID closure will be less.
So let me try to give you a real example. So what we're talking about here is TID 5. So 2 years ago, we closed TID 3 that was started, 20-plus years ago, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And when we did that, what that allowed was there was a cash inflow to the village, which was a good timing because that's when all the high inflationary pressure started hitting. So we were able to absorb salary increases because a big part of our costs are labor for staff. We were able to absorb those salary increases to keep good staff here as opposed to having turnover and not have any tax impact to the rest of the taxpayers. Then that also coupled with some increased state aid last year allowed us to do another police officer hiring as well. So that's the goal here is our ability to, basically we're trying to increase the size of the pie. And the bigger the pie, the less individually everybody has to contribute to that, if that makes sense. So this is one of the few ways the state gives us to incentivize that pie growth. I can't just come in and do that. So the catch is, though, as you can see, we're talking 27 years out. This is a long-term thing. But as I mentioned earlier, some of the other benefits are, so while it's not your taxes, the village does run the sewer utility. So you pay sewer rates, and when we increase water and sewer rates, then you would pay those. Well, how the Public Service Commission usually does that is they look at capital projects. And so we would go to them and say, hey, we've got to do this lift station. That's the station there at the corner of School Street there. Yeah, across the street. And by the way, we also want it to look better than it does. So if this project wasn't occurring, at some point, we would be going to the
No.
sorry, we don't have the PSC for sewer, I'm sorry. Anyway, we would be increasing those rates to cover that capital. So we would say, hey, we've got a $2 million thing, where are we going to pay for it? Ratepayers would have to pay for that. Now, this project goes through, we don't have to do that. And one of the things that Kayla was talking about is the developer in this case is going to sign an agreement that's guaranteeing this value. So if the developer goes out, takes one shovelful of dirt, turns it over, and does nothing more, he's agreed that this is now worth this value. And so the tax portion of that would bear that out. And so in essence, this is basically creating a self-funding unit. That's why we were talking about the cash flow. There's this cash flow. And of course, it's going to be negative at the beginning. It's going to be positive at the end. Does that help kind of clarify? Yeah. Okay.
I have one other question. As far as development goes, there's been rumors that there's going to be sidewalks built into our property line along Main Street there. Is that a thing? Is
I
that,
believe I spoke with maybe your husband about that. There might have been a phone call on that, unless I'm thinking of the neighboring
No, it
property.
could have.
Yeah,
He
so,
called around.
yes, there is a sidewalk planned on that side of the street. And we had talked about that, I think, because of a retaining wall. So, yeah, that is true that there are sidewalks planned on that side of the street.
okay, and then like, that's like a for sure thing that's going to happen, or?
The development plan includes having the sidewalks, yes.
And that's been passed, like approved, or?
Whether or
anything?
not it happens in the first year, we don't know though, right? I think, was that your question, whether it'll be done in the first year?
You're asking about timing, or
Not
you're asking just whether
necessarily
it'll be done?
timing, and just like how we missed all of that and weren't really felt in, like we were informed on all this stuff that might be happening to our property.
So, one, the sidewalk would be constructed in the right-of-way, so it's not
Well,
technically.
yeah, my property, okay.
Yes, I just,
It's going to affect my property.
it will affect your property, correct, but I just want to be clear on that. So, anytime, that we're looking, like we had with the School Street reconstruction, we will take a look and make sure that there's not any impacts. If there's a retaining wall or something like that, we're going to bear those costs. So that we made a bunch of ordinance changes about that this year, where instead of trying to do special assessments, I guess, is that your concern, is that you would have a cost, or is it just you don't want the sidewalk, or I guess?
Well, I don't want the sidewalk,
Okay.
I'll be frank. But just more so like, as far as like our yard and our property goes to, like with how the grading and all that, and more detailed information and,
Yeah, so to the grading piece of that, when it's actually going to be constructed, then we'll have our engineering firm put that together and go out and survey, make sure, from like a water flow standpoint, things like that, that's addressed, if that's your concern there.
Yeah, nothing's been decided yet. They haven't brought this to the board to say this is what we want to have. This is exactly where the sidewalk's going to go. But there's been kind of a spur of identification of connectivity in this community, and we've been putting sidewalks in randomly over the past 6 years to try and bring it back to a walkable community. And having a development of this size and the residents that they're going to be there, those businesses on that square definitely want that sidewalk coming through. And as far as, I understand exactly what you're talking about, your home is, and the way it just slopes off directly from the road, there would be some kind of engineering that would be involved. There would be, at the expense of the village, to put up some kind of retaining wall there to maintain a flatter area, to try and, accommodate a sidewalk coming through there.
okay, I guess my biggest concern is how do I stay involved, and so I'm aware of what the plan is and going forward.
That would be a public construction contract when that gets to that point. So that would have to be publicized. But I'm making a note here to talk to our Public Works Director just to make sure. I think they typically do send a letter to all the property owners. So it's being included in this plan because it's something that we as a village have committed to doing, but the contract hasn't been bid or anything like that at this point, because obviously the TID's not approved, so we can't go that far, so.
Yeah.
But when we get to those points, those details would be worked out, but I do have a note here, and I will follow up with our Public Works Director.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you for coming. Other questions during the public hearing? Other questions from the commission?
All right, I got one more. So,
That's, okay, go for it.
so with the conversation you just had with the young lady over there, now you're saying that our property values will go up if this happens. So if that goes up and our houses get reassessed, that means our property taxes are going to go up.
No, just because your assessment goes up does not necessarily mean your property tax bill goes up.
As assessments get changed, so the mill rates get changed, so it's kind of all kind of ebb and flows.
Okay.
I mean, if everybody's assessed value went up 10% equally and everything else remained the same, your tax bill would remain the same. But if you went up 20% and everybody stayed flat, then yeah, your rate. But as Scott said, there's also what is the mill rate, what's everything else that's happening. So there's no real guarantee on that. And I think that's kind of what Kayla was talking about too, of as values or equalized values are increasing statewide, and we saw this in our budget too, tax rates are going down. So much so that expenditure restraint, we're not getting dollars from the state because our tax rate is too low under what's called expenditure restraint, which I don't understand, even though we meet on the expense side.
We used to have to worry about how much did we spend, so we stayed underneath that to get money from the state.
Now, I mean, and I guess nobody can guarantee that everybody's value is going to go up. I mean, who knew that we were going to have a pandemic? Who knew we were going to have the Great Recession? You know, that all happened in the past 10 years, let alone 27 years. So, you know, I'm not going to guarantee that anybody's property values are going to go up. The assumption is that it will. And as Kayla put in here, there's a lot of assumptions in here. It's a 27-year plan.
Yeah, I mean, TID districts at the creation point are naturally predicative with what we know at this point in time. And obviously, as values change and environmental factors change, like pandemics, that will have a huge bearing on that. I think in the year following the pandemic, we saw specifically in a lot of commercial TIDs, a decrement situation where large commercial properties closed or businesses closed. But now we're seeing the rebound effect of those things coming back. But specifically on the residential side, in a community like this and where the location in relation to the main downtown area is, a development purely of the size and scope of Overlook Ridge will have nothing but a positive effect, not only to the surrounding property values, the attractiveness and an attractiveness from a quality of resident and employer standpoint, but also those things like walkability, sidewalks. Well, I know, because I wouldn't want one in front of my house if I was honest, sidewalks improve property values. That is a positive property value marker because it's a sign of a walkable community and connecting communities and safety and all those type of things. So from a property valuation standpoint, developments like Overlook Ridge create a natural economic appreciation of surrounding property values. How that relates to assessed value are two different things, though.
Other questions? Comments? So before we exit the public hearing, the next item, it would be the possible consideration, possible action on the resolution. So if there's anything that you have questions about that would impact your ability to make a decision on that, then we should discuss that in the public hearing. Okay. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. We'll move on to item B, consideration and possible action on a resolution establishing the boundaries of and approving the project plan for tax increment district number 5.
Wrong button, sorry. electronically challenged and all that, you know, it is. I guess I'll make a motion then, that therefore be it resolved that the Plan Commission of the Village of East Troy that will recommend to the village board that the TX incremental district number 5 be created with the boundaries as designated in Exhibit A of this resolution, and that it approves and adopts the project plans for the district attached. It is Exhibit B and recommends its approval to the village board. And also creation of the district promotes orderly development in the village.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the, to adopt the resolution. Any questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you all. We know it's a very complicated thing. If you think of other questions, please let us know. We and the commission and staff are here to try to answer your questions. So thanks for coming out. I'll let you be the judge if it was as exciting as Scott said. Thanks, Kayla. All right. Another exciting topic, going back to ordinances and code amendments. Item 1, an ordinance to amend the village's zoning regulations, Chapter 510, regarding mobile food establishments. I will open the public hearing on this. You see Warren's background here. I think we're all quite familiar with this. Anything else you want to highlight for us here, Warren?
We made the subject changes from our previous meeting, taking out some of the language which is noted in the staff review. And we are just here to have this public hearing and recommend this to the village board.
All right. Any questions from the commission?
I think the only question I have would be the one verbiage in there identifying signage. It does not include a menu signage, is that correct? Because almost every one of these establishments has some kind of independent menu board.
Right, I think it would be your advertising signage. I mean, I can look at the sign code again to see what the exemptions specifically are for, you know, the temporary type signage that somebody might have associated with something like this, but essentially, the food trucks in these cases are a mobile sign, if you will, but that's part of the nature of this is that it's going away at the end of the day, right? It's not just gonna be there all the time, parked like a billboard. So it goes with them, but that's most of their advertising is their truck nowadays, and then online. I mean, that's mainly how they're getting people driving traffic to these is a mobile presence, whether they're, you know, on Facebook or whatever. So I don't foresee an issue with that, but we can look at that further to make sure the exemptions are there for them to be able to do something.
Yeah, I definitely want to allow them to run their business as successful as they can. If it's a menu board that sits on a small A-frame piece out front of it, then that makes sense. And if it's a violation of it because of the verbiage in here that identifies signage, then I definitely want to make sure that that's changed.
Other questions or comments?
I just had a question on number 1. It says, placement of mobile food establishments must be located on or next to an existing parking lot. How does that affect, like, on the square and stuff like that? Or
Well, again,
if-
this
if
is
Scott wanted to have
specifically
something.
for these to be able to be on private property. And what we're saying is we don't want you to be parked on the landscaping, essentially. You need to be on a paved surface. And so this is not allowing anybody to be on a public right-of-way. We have a process, the village has a process for allowing events to take place in and around the square and for vehicles to be parked in the right-of-way during those events. Separate issue. This is on private property. So if you're going to be on a private property with your food truck, we want you to be on a paved surface, improved surface.
So do you think that'd be better to say paved surface instead of parking lot? Because that's kind of a, when I think of a parking lot, I think of outside.
Not necessarily, because we also want there to be ingress and egress and for there to be some kind of structure to what's going on. If we just said, you know, something less specific than parking lot, you could potentially be on a property that doesn't have the ingress and egress infrastructure to support people coming to see you and visit you And we want that to exist too. So we want an orderly flow, and we want you to be, we want everything to be safe and efficient, right? So you're going to have a business, they're likely going to have a parking lot. If they don't have a parking lot, there are street parking in certain areas that's available, right? But maybe not in every instance. So the question is, do you want somebody to be on a property where there isn't really room for people to come and stop their vehicle to pick something up, right? And I think that's more of the situation of having this allowed within the right-of-way, which we didn't tackle that. That would involve the village getting into the licensing business for these and something more intense than what we're getting at. We're dipping a toe and just saying, if it's gonna be on a private property, there should be some room for you there.
I guess my situation or the scenario is, let's say I have a birthday party for myself and I hire a food truck to come in my driveway and feed everybody that's at my party. Is that a parking lot then?
It's not gonna be covered by this.
Because you're not, because, again, so we had our three scenarios. So one is on the right-of-way, like around the square that we do for the chamber events. That's the event permitting process. The second is on private property for private use. So that, you do whatever you want, because it's like, I just can't walk up to your birthday party and say, hey, I'm going to buy a taco, because it's for your party, And then there's what this is, which is on private property for public use, meaning all members of the public.
All right, thank you.
I'll just give you an example of, in my neighborhood, there's a brewery. The space was redeveloped. It was formerly a garden and pet supply business. They redeveloped it into a brewery outfit out of Neenah. And now they have a paved space next to their outdoor seating area at the front of it. And they have food truck vendors come and park. They don't do the restaurant license. They just serve beer. It's a tap room. It's not a production facility for them either. They've got some space for that they haven't capitalized on yet, but they want to have a food truck there to help activate the space and keep people thirsty. And so they have different vendors come in and out and park there. So that's an example of somebody that might be interested in doing something like this.
Other questions, comments? Okay, I will close the public hearing, and then we'll move on to discussion and recommendation to the village board. So you see the draft ordinance presented there.
I make a motion to recommend to the village board the approval of the proposed text set forth in the draft ordinance with the signage verbiage potential change.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion on that? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Looking forward to more food trucks. Okay, we are going down to recommendations for future agenda items. We talked about these the last time, the two-family residential planned land use category. That's probably a hot topic for us, given we talked about possibly TID 6 in the future. Tiny homes, accessory uses in residential zoning districts, followed by revise the application requirements for rezoning petitions, and then the potential regulations, information related to front yard setbacks on side-loaded homes. Any changes to those or any requests for additional items? All right, our next meeting is January 13th, 6:30, and I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great holiday. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. All those things. Enjoy your peanut brittle. Or, sorry, what is it?
Thank you.
Cashew, excuse me. Cashew.